Alrighty, welcome. So today we're going to be having a look at doing compound interest in a spreadsheet, and we're going to talk about compounding periods a little bit more. So, Alex invests $20,000 at an interest rate of 5% per annum for 3 years with interest added quarterly. So this tells us that it is compound interest, because for simple interest it doesn't matter when we actually add the interest, whereas for compound interest, it really does make a difference, right? So you take a principal, P, then you calculate the interest based on that P, and then you can add them together to get the amount of money that you have got. Now, in simple interest, say you get $50 in the first one, well, you're going to get $50 in the second, and 50 and 50, and so on and so forth. Whatever the amount of interest you get in the first round is going to be the same in the 6th year or the 5th year or the 4th year, right? So it's not going to change over time. Whereas in compound interest, that's not the case. So what happens is that your first principal, at the end of 1 year, you get some amount of money in the bank. Then your new principal, let's call it P2, has new interest calculated on it, which gives us a new amount of money at the end of the second year. And then we use that at the start, so this is the same as that. And then we repeat and we get new interest and then a new value at the end of the account. And we can calculate it at any period. The thing that changes is the interest. So the interest that we are going to calculate is going to be using the same rule. So let's set up our table. So we're going to have quarters over here, principal, interest, and balance, which is A, but we usually call it balance for some reason. I prefer balance. If you want to call it amount or amount in the account, that's up to you, but I prefer balance for my labeling. So the first quarter is just going to be 1. The principal is just 20,000. But that doesn't look great, so I'm just going to use the dollars, but now it's got decimal places. Don't really want the decimal places, so let's get rid of those decimal places by clicking these buttons up here. So that dollar sign, just do that. And now I want the next one to be a 2, and obviously I could just type 2, but I'm lazy, so I'm going to learn a formula. So to start a formula, you type an equal sign, and then what you can do, let me zoom in, is you can type an equal sign and then you can click on any cell to reference it. So for example, I could be like, okay, well, I want it to be this cell, and then, well, that's just going to copy that cell, so that's not exactly what we want. So I want it to be this cell plus 1. And now when I click enter, you can see it's a 2. You go, wow, hey presto, that's great. If you want to copy this formula, because I want it to also go here. Obviously, you could just go copy and paste. That works. It's not very exciting. So instead, I'm going to do something else. Another thing is I'm going to use this magic crosshair. So you see I've got a white cross at the moment. My cursor is a white cross. Now it's a thin black cross. And now it's a black cross, special black cross. And this is the one that we are after. And if we click while it's a special black cross, white cross, thin cross, black cross, it will copy the formula for us, okay? And if you've gone too far, you can even copy back, okay? Now, we'll do that in a little bit, but I just thought I'd show you how to do that. Now, for the interest is going to be calculated using PIN, okay? So it's going to be the principal times the interest times the number of years, or the amount of time. But notice, I don't really have a time symbol, and you'll notice I'm using this asterisk, which you can find above the number 8. In computing, instead of multiplication, we have the asterisk, which means the same thing. So it's the time symbol on the computer. We don't use an X, we use the time symbol, because we use X to mean the letter X. Alrighty, so let's go through and calculate it. Problem, this interest, right, is written like so. The interest rate is 5% per annum. Right? But it says that it calculates it quarterly. So do you get 5% every single quarter? Well, no, that wouldn't be per year then. That would be 5% per quarter. So the problem is that this interest rate is written as a quarterly as a yearly rate, and we need to write it per quarter. So how do we do that? Well, we need to divide it by 4. So this is where something really powerful comes in. And it's going to make your life a lot easier if you can calculate 5% to decimal quickly. And I'm going to be from now on, whenever I write my percentages, I'm going to be trying to write them as a decimal after dividing by 100. Makes life a lot easier. Okay, so you see there, I've just divided 5 by 100 and I get 0.05. That is 5% as a decimal. And this isn't my interest rate. So 0.05 is not my interest rate. That is my yearly interest rate. If I divide it by 4, that is my per quarter. And that is the interest rate I'm going to be using. So for little I in the formula, PIN, this is the one I'm going to be using. Now, what I'm going to be doing is for N is time. So how long is it for each of these? Well, it's 1 quarter, which is perfect because 1 quarter is exactly how often I want it to be calculated. So I is going to be that, N is going to be 1 quarter, and the principal currently is 20,000, but the principal is going to change. So the interest is equal to P, the principal, times 0.05 over 4. That's my interest rate times the number of quarters, my N, 1, enter, done. There is my interest calculated. Now to calculate my balance, I take my principal and I add my interest. It's like calculating A. So it's just principal plus interest. And there you go. Now, once again, these two have both decided to include these extra decimal places, so I'm going to get rid of those. And I'm going to set up this whole section to be in dollars, so that it thinks they're dollars. And I'm going to get rid of those places. So now if I type a 5 in here, it just says $5. Alrighty, so the new principal, this is an easy formula. I want it to be equal to whatever the previous balance was. Alrighty, now I've got formula here, I've got a formula here, I've got a formula here, and I've got a formula here. All I want is to get them in a row. So to do that, I'm just going to special click, special click, drag, select the row, drag down. There you go. So after 1 year, which would be 4 quarters, because there's 4 quarters in a year, you would have $21,019. After 2 years, which would be 8 quarters, you'd have $22,090. At the start of that quarter, you would have had this amount, but at the end of the quarter, this is the end of the quarter, which is usually when we want the information, not at the beginning of the quarter. Alrighty, so let's now look at the question. Use a spreadsheet to determine the principal after 9 months. Months? We just did everything in quarters. Do I need to do this again, months? No, not at all. I just need to convert from 9 months into quarters. Now, some of you might know exactly how this works, but if you're not sure, then what you can do is you can divide the months by 12, and that's how many years it is, which is 0.75 years. But that doesn't help. That's not in quarters yet. But we can then multiply that by 4, 0.75 times 4, and that's going to get it into quarters. And if you do that, you can find out that's 3 quarters. Okay, so for 9 months, that's the equivalent of 3 quarters. So determine the principal after 9 months really means after 3 quarters. So at the end of 3 quarters is going to be $20,000 and 759 cents. So for question A, that's our answer, 20,759 with a dollar sign out the front, please. Alrighty, let's look at B. B asks for it after 18 months. Well, we just worked out that 1 quarter is 3 months. So we could either just divide by 3, or we could just go, well, it's 9 months. We want 18 months, so it's just going to be 6 quarters. So 18 months, well, if we've doubled that, it's going to be double the number of quarters. So after 6 quarters, that's going to be this row here, and in particular, this value here. So for B, it's going to be $21,548. And then for C, the principal after 3 years, well, years to quarters, right? 3 years times by 4, which is going to leave us with 12 quarters. So it's after 12 quarters, which is here on the table. And so in this case, I can actually get rid of some of these formulas because I only needed the first 3 years, or 12 quarters. And the answer would be this one. Alrighty, so let's type it up. And those are my 3 answers to part A, B, and C of this question over here. And all of it I pretty much did using a spreadsheet. Now, at the beginning, spreadsheets are quite tricky to use and it does take a little bit of practice. If you've done it before, you're not going to find this too new, but some of you may find this a little bit tricky to do. Now, the big key takeaway is what I did over here for the interest rate here. Because this is a per annum rate and we want to do it quarterly, we take the interest rate and we divide it by 4. And notice, I just converted from percentage to decimal. That's something you're going to have to get used to doing. Alrighty, lots to have a look at. I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.